The Acting Minister of Police, Feroz Kachalia, has revealed shocking statistics. Let us get the details from Ian Cameron, the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's indeed, it comes from a parliamentary question of, and it's a very important comparison about how many murders in the past 4 financial years were committed with licensed versus unlicensed firearms.
Give us that total involving illegal and unlicensed firearms, please, Ian.
Well, before I give you the exact numbers, I think it's important to say that so often we hear the narrative being pushed, especially by certain entities in the state, that gives the impression that licensed firearm owners are the problem and that licensed firearms pose a serious threat to general public safety. Now, this data set that comes directly from the South African Police Service proves otherwise. It shows us that 99%, it's just a fraction over 99% of recorded firearm murders that were committed over the past 4 financial years were committed by unlicensed firearms. So the total amount is just over 41,000 murders that were committed with unlicensed firearms, and fewer than 400 murders involved licensed firearms. So, I mean, the contrast is glaring, that the attack, the constant, almost obsession with attacking lawfully armed, licensed firearm owners versus unlicensed firearm owners, this shows that the licensed firearm owners are not the problem. In fact, they hardly pose any threat at all.
And that small number of killings committed with licensed firearms, many would not have been premeditated murder, but self-defense.
Well, and that depends from case to case, and that's something we need to go look at. We would need to go even deeper and see, was there prosecution? Was there successful conviction of any kind? What adds insult to injury for the state is that out of those 41,000 murders, 166 of them were committed using what used to belong or once belonged to the state. So firearms that used to be state firearms. So this just further emphasizes that the state itself very often, whether intentionally or not, provides firearms to illicit firearm networks or illicit firearm owners, and that lawfully armed citizens are not the problem. Now, there's a very important message here. And over the years, we've seen the onslaught from organizations like Gun Free South Africa, etc., etc. We saw the attempts to change firearm legislation back when Bheki Cele was still the Minister of Police. It was an epic fail. He had to put the legislation on ice, and I think it's soon to be placed back on ice again, where they want to remove self-defense as a reason or a motivation to own a firearm in South Africa. This in a country where less than 10% of murders are actually properly investigated and solved. And that's not even mentioning the low prosecution rate. So it's physically impossible to do so. And I think this data is the first time in many years that through this parliamentary question, we've actually been led in the exact direction that we need to. It not only further exaggerates and emphasizes the state's own sanctioned research that says licensed firearm owners are not the problem, but it goes even further to show that they are virtually no problem at all. The ones that put in the effort to comply with legislation and regulations are not the ones walking around arbitrarily killing people and arbitrarily killing between 50 and 70 people per day in South Africa. So I'm really grateful that we've come to this point, because it gives us an opportunity to just further push away this failure of an attempt to disarm lawfully armed citizens.
Ian, how easy is it to get an illegal firearm these days, and how cheap?
Well, if we listen to people that have done research on it, you listen to comment by people like Willem Els, you go and listen to check out the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. It's not difficult at all. If you look at the amount of firearms being seized in places like Nyanga or Langa, Alexandra, even Mitchell's Plain. You can go look at these areas and you see that there certainly is a constant flow of illicit firearms. The interesting part, Chris, is that recently we've actually been seeing an increase in brand new firearms as well. Firearms that weren't previously owned by licensed firearm owners, but that was somehow smuggled. So whether they came in from seaport side or through other borders, we I don't know. I don't work directly with that. But the long and the short of it is that there is a tremendous supply. Remember, and I think I've said it to you before, if we look at the Global Initiative for Transnational Organized Crime and the research they've done, they've previously indicated that in the Southern African region, there are over 3.2 million illicit firearms in circulation. Now, I think that would likely be a very conservative number, because at the rate at which we're seeing certain illicit firearm crime increase, there must be more, heavy or more or heavier supplies being pushed into South Africa.
So the government is obviously losing, or has lost, the war on illegal firearms, whilst forging ahead with legislation that would effectively disarm private citizens and leave them defenseless.
Right. So, I mean, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And I asked this question a few months back to the Police Civilian Secretariat, where I said to the secretary, but, what have you done to enforce your own rules and regulations with regards to the Central Firearm Registry? That's a total mess that it shouldn't be in. What have you done to ensure that we don't see the amount of firearm losses that we see currently from state armories? I mean, in the last financial year, SAPS lost almost 800 firearms. Now, that may have been, they may have been lost, some may have been stolen, others may have been supplied to illicit networks. So, um, uh, I don't understand why they keep pushing on, or I choose not or choose to think that I don't understand. But there's no doubt that there's a political, some kind of a political ideological push to disarm and to centralize power. Now, let me tell you one thing: if they should ever succeed with this draconian and absolutely ridiculous piece of legislation, it would result in tyranny. We've seen it around the world. We saw what happened in Venezuela, back in the day in Germany, currently in parts of Mexico, where entire cartels, by far, outnumber and dominate any form of state capacity, and literally control entire regions. So it's a very, very dangerous thing when it's only the state that has the monopoly on arms. We are totally pro regulation. It's important that solid regulation does exist, but it must not further infringe or actually make people more unsafe because of the total schlep and frustration that goes along with it.
Well, Ian, it's already incredibly hard to get a firearm license for law-abiding citizens. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's a frustration, right? I mean, at the moment, a lot of people know that I live in Paarl, and at the Paarl police station itself, the backlog in terms of firearm licenses has just increased drastically over the last few months, just because of certain staff changes and so on. The problem is that this entire system is based on paper. It's based on specific human capacity, whereas a lot of it could have been digitized a long time ago. Money was previously budgeted. The CFR, up until today, despite all of the investment done in the structure, or allegedly done, it hasn't seen the development that it was meant to see, and it hasn't seen the improvement that it was meant to see. And remember, furthermore, that they're trying to get hold of the training capacity and facilities as well. So there's a broader onslaught. You also have the attempted changes of private security regulations, the proposed SIRA amendment regulations, where they also want to change certain things. So there's no doubt that there's an attempt to grab control of any form of private security or safety measures that individual citizens try to put in place because of the gap that's left by poor performance by government.
Healthcare matters, but what matters most?
Having cover for the people who keep this business going.
Bonitas is there for you when it counts. Bonitas, medical aid for South Africa. Visit bonitas.co.za and find your plan.
Ian, let's talk about something else. The sudden resignation of IDAC Chief Andrea Johnson. Surely this will have wide-ranging implications for some of the big cases she worked on.
Yeah, I think we were expecting it with the way that the testimony was going at the Madlanga Commission. I think what stood out was the fact that there were quite a number of things. There were quite a number of things where she uh, almost seemed confused, if that's the right word, unsure of whether they took the right decision in the past or not. But it will have an effect. It especially has an effect on the credibility of not only IDAC, but also the MPA. The bad part is that everyone in IDAC is not bad. It's the same with SAPS. Everyone in SAPS is not bad. Um, and I think this just further increases the already very very hectic mistrust or distrust in systems or institutions like IDAC or even the South African Police Service. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it's come to this point, but we were expecting it.
She'd barely resigned when charges were provisionally withdrawn against Crime Intelligence boss General Dumisani Kumalo.
Yeah, what's interesting about it, and this stood out to me so far. I mean, I know she's busy with her testimony still, but something that stood out was the fact that a lot of the charges and investigations weren't necessarily because of serious organized crime for which they were meant to or established to investigate in their specific mandate, or corruption. Um, but it was almost as though they thought they would anticipate it happening, and therefore they had to now investigate. So it became quite confusing to listen to parts of the testimony, and I think the commissioners and the evidence leaders almost made it impossible to escape the contradictions during the testimony. So yeah, it has been provisionally withdrawn. It'll be very interesting. I'd be quite surprised if they were to bring them back, because they really have to be very, very sure of their case if they were to do so.
Well, Ian, maybe this is a good time to talk about what could have happened if all the evidence we have heard over the past year has not emerged. Special Leave Police Minister Senzo Mchunu could have become the president of the African National Congress and possibly president of the country. General Shadrach Sibiya could have become national commissioner. General Feroz Khan, could have become the head of crime intelligence. And Johnson herself might have ended up heading the NPA.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Chris. I mean, we've repeated the almost the what ifs, because that was a definite scenario. I mean, everyone knew that there was a specific faction of people that seemed to be dead set on securing control of certain leadership positions. It's very, very important that we don't lose sight of what was anticipated back then, specifically the part of taking control of the management of the South African Police Service. And if you look at some of the charges now, and especially those that are provisionally withdrawn, it does make it look quite suspicious, especially towards parts of the senior management of the South African Police Service. One has to wonder and must ask the question whether it wasn't something that was orchestrated somehow by some of the names that you've mentioned to gain more control. Because remember, if you had gained control of especially crime intelligence and obviously the office of the National Commissioner, you would have relatively easy access to the Secret Service funds, which obviously is a massive amount of money that very often ends up in a political tug of war. Because if you control that and you know how to seemingly use it in the wrong way, you would be able to get a lot of money for your campaigning and political work.
I think we still need to find out who masterminded, who's the mastermind or the masterminds.
Isn't it interesting though? Because if you look at Mr. Kat Matlala and you look at what was uncovered over the last few weeks at the Madlanga Commission, you look at the role that General Molefe Fane, the head of supply chain management that's currently on suspension, that he played in illicit supply chain activities or wrongful supply chain activities and procurement processes, and also the Medicare 24 contract. And the link that General Fani has or had with General Feroz Khan, uh, it it does seem like there was a longer term strategy at play. And it's also interesting that a lot of the dates that they refer back to at the Madlanga Commission touch on the COVID-19 time period when General Fani was still, I believe, working at National Treasury as a chief procurement officer and was one of the people that assisted at that time with the facilitation of a whole big procurement process of PPE for the South African Police Service. That was later, as we've previously discussed, investigated and findings made by the SIU. So certainly, I've got no doubt we mustn't underestimate how in depth and detailed a lot of the planning goes to perform some of these bigger, broader strategies. I think it is is possibly might still be a massive risk to the stability of the criminal justice system.
Well, Ian, if we look at, or we can only imagine what was at stake for these people, was it any wonder that people were so desperate to discredit General Makunazi?
Yeah, so look, I think General Kornazi, everything that he's done is by no means perfect. None of us, I think, have any kind of a way of saying we do everything perfectly. But if it weren't for that day, a lot of the processes that unfolded after the press conference wouldn't have happened. So the Madlanga Commission wouldn't have started. The ad hoc committee, for what it was worth, wouldn't have kicked off. And I think it's important to give credit to the fact that it ignited a, a far bigger inquiry process that's led to a lot of investigation work and a lot of results as well. I think the fact that we've already seen arrests we've seen court appearances, we've seen movement that we haven't seen, in my opinion, from any commission in the past 15 to 20 years. I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Do you think this could be the big turning point for the South African police force, Ian?
I think it can be a turning point. I listened to the acting police minister's police reset strategy over the weekend. I'm very concerned about the fact that on the 30th of June, the private sector had to be reeled in to assist the South African Police Service, but now an entire strategy is announced, and from what I hear, no one that was part of the 30th of June was consulted in any way. So I guess their answer would be, but you're very difficult to satisfy. Well, yes, because the results that we see are usually lacking in every single way. We haven't seen any radical action being taken. We hear a lot of big things, but from the police itself, we haven't seen any radical movement. The only movement that we've seen was forced movement because of the Matlanga Commission. I'm concerned because they say there's this big focus on organized crime, but you can't do that without a decent intelligence structure. And our intelligence capacity in the South African Police Service is significantly broken, significantly lacking, and hasn't nearly utilized the relevant budget, or even received the relevant budget in many cases, to be able to do the work that they are meant to do. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I don't want to say it's a turning point yet. I think it's an opportunity, but we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you. That was Ian Cameron, the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police, speaking to Biz News. I'm Christine. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Chris.
Start your day a step ahead. Biz News Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox. Sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The Biz News Conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9. Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description.